When they planted these orchards, they were planting a recipe, 8, 9 different varieties in each orchard, and when they're all picked and together, they made a certain style of cider.
Hello, my name is Rhea Wincaller, and I am the producer and cider MC of this weekly podcast, where we speak with makers, cider enthusiasts, and folks within the cider trade from around the world.
Hip, hip, hooray!
That was Paul Stevens of Newton Court bringing us into episode 471 of Cider Chat, talking about orchards that are planted with specific apple trees. Of course, he was talking about the orchards at his farm, but really talking about orchards everywhere. There's recipes. It's a landscape of recipes. And if you're new to the world of cider or orchards, that might be something that you hadn't heard. Maybe this is the first time to consider orchards as recipes. But don't worry, you're not out of the loop. You're not alone. Until I really started doing a deep dive into cider or planting trees of my own, I never really thought about it. And there are a lot of moving parts when it comes to making cider. So that's why you're here at Cider Chat, so we could find our way together through the maze. And certainly now that you know that orchards are designed often based upon specific cider recipes, maybe next time you're out there wondering about your own family's farm or house or home that your ancestors had done plantings at, or you visit, let's say, a historic estate with orchards, maybe you'll see that landscape a little bit differently. And I hope you do, because it really allows us to get the full map of what's going on continually for food production and certainly for cider making. We're going to be going to that conversation with Paul Stevens coming up because he is our featured guest in this here episode. But first, we have a wee bit of news from out and about in Ciderville. This episode releases the first day of October 2025, and outside of Cider Chat Central, the apples are dropping, and so are the acorns. This is a little bit about what I was just talking about in terms of being futuristic when you're planting, because I have a giant oak tree outside my home, and in truth, it should have come down years ago before I bought this home, because a tree as big as that oak can do a lot of damage during high winds. And this time of year, vehicles are not to be parked under its canopy because they can both leave dents and chip windshields. And it's a problem. And it's kind of a sad problem. You see this a lot in the U.S. around suburbia, where originally there was all these like row houses built, and they had probably each plot had maybe a 1/4 acre of land, and folks planted their trees. And now, like 50 years later, those trees are, it's costing big bucks to take down those trees. They're glorious trees, but nobody managed them. And that's a little bit of what's going on outside here with the acorns. And, you know, I love trees, but I also know that they can become a nuisance, even our beautiful fruit trees. Back in episode 466, which was titled Growing Cold Hardy Trees at St. Lawrence Nursery, I was talking to Alyssa and Connor Hardiman about their nursery, and also how Bill McKentley, who was a previous nursery steward, had planted peri-pear trees in the city of Potsdam, New York. Those select trees are now producing fruit, and at the time of that recording this summer, Alyssa and Connor mentioned that the city loves it when people can pick up the fruit, because fallen fruit, it can attract vermin if you just leave it there. It can make walking really hard, if not dangerous, for all different kinds of folks with different abilities on the sidewalk, and basically becomes, if left unattended, a nuisance. I know a whole select mini orchard of golden hornet crab apples at a rest area. Well, it's actually a gas station off of Interstate 90. Beautiful, beautiful golden hornets. And it's at a gas station, and they do a nice job of putting picnic tables there. But if I go by, they're like, please pick it, because it's a pain. It takes money and time to be able to pick that up, and then folks end up cutting it down. So this is all to say that when you are planting trees, And October is a big time for folks to plant trees. Do think long term so that that magnificent future tree doesn't become a nuisance right now when it has reached its prime, like my giant oak. I hate to say it, but it will in all likelihood be dropped either this year or next. And that just really, breaks my heart. Not sure what to do about that. So when you plant trees, think forward. Think forward about utility of the landscape and create your own recipe on how that land's going to be used, whether you're going to have a driveway going there, how close to the house. Because that little tree, just like that little puppy or little kitten or little kid, will grow up and won't be small at some point down the stage. So being future in planning is always a good way to go. I have a couple mistakes that I want to clear up from some past episodes, some things I said that weren't quite correct. So I want to go back to episode 469, just 2 episodes ago, regarding the recap of the UK Cider Tour. And I was talking about seeing the Showering Mill. It's in Shepton Mallet. We had a tour there led by Bob Cork. And while we were there, as part of the tour, was walking in the production site. And I had mentioned these tanks that a lot of people talk about because at that time when Showering was in production of Babysham, which is a sparkling perry, the demand was so great that they had to create more capacity to make more Babysham. So they brought in a ton of tanks. They're all positioned outside, and down the line, the buildings were built to cover the tanks. So it's kind of like what happens, first the chicken or the egg. And in this case, it was the tanks way before the building. And so we got to see it because that's a cool piece of history. But the thing about the tanks is, during that episode, I said that they were vertical tanks. They're actually horizontal tanks. And I'm going to have a photo in the show notes of what the tanks look like. They're all white. The outside of the tanks are white, and they're all laying flat. Some are stacked on top of each other, not on each other, but it's a stacked. And so as such, they don't have to have really tall rooms. And it creates a lot of capacity in a very small space. Pretty cool history, too, because you don't often see in the fermentation world horizontal tanks. Typically, they're standing upright. So just for history, let's get that clarified. And do check the show notes for this here episode 471 to get a photo of what the tanks look like. And in last week's episode, I heard myself asking, I don't know why I do this, but it happens, okay? This is part of the way the mind thinks. I heard myself asking each maker in the UK, and that was Tom Bowles of Hedger Cider and Ben Crossman of Crossman Cider, how large their orchards were in terms of hectares. And I kept on doing it the whole time I was there, and that was last October, because they don't measure in hectares in the UK. They measure in acres. And so asking about hectares was just kind of like throwing them a little bit, but that was happening because I had just arrived from France. I just led a tour in France, and I spent some time before then, and I was just steeped into France. And sometimes my mind can't catch up to where I am in the world. I imagine this happens to you. I know I'm not alone, and let's just kind of clarify that. I listen to myself talk, and sometimes it's just like, where am I going? So I can say, having lived with this little bit of bandwidth, aka my brain, though remarkable, it doesn't always catch up to where I am. And if you think it's easy producing a weekly global podcast and getting all the facts straight every time, it is not. But I still love it all the same. So just like AI, sometimes Cider Check has to be fact-checked if you're using the transcripts here for historical research, which I know happens now and will definitely happen in the future. So cross-reference data. Save the date for September 2026. It'll probably be one of the 2 last weeks in September. I can't really confirm it just yet until we know we got all the reservations locked in there. But Yes, there'll be another Totally Cider tour to France. It'll be in Paris, Normandy, and Brittany. We are getting it all geared up right now, and it'll be once again a magnificent tour. In fact, it's so magnificent that and the UK Cider Tour, all those folks on the tour, we just become friends forever. In fact, just a few days ago was the anniversary for last fall's Totally Cider Tour to France, and up on our little group chat from that group came a message from Leslie, and she has a little glass of Calvados, and I can see the glass says Manoir d'April, which is Agathe Letier's domain, and it's this beautiful background of her, the house there, and the shade, the little cave where they keep the Calvados, and she wrote, "Happy 1-year anniversary of one of the most fun vacations of our lives. Cheers." I love that. It kind of like brings a tear to my eye. I just want to like scoop everybody up on these tour groups and just cuddle them up and bring them along with me forever. And really, they do. They come with me forever. Probably you're listening there. Some of you out there have been on the tours. So that's what it's about. I mean, that just kind of sums it up. I could tell you all the amazing places we're going to, and I will. But that sums it up. So if you're interested in experiencing French cider like nobody's business and delving into the culture and being able to just sit back and enjoy the ride and not really have to think about anything other than where's my glass? And don't worry, if you don't have a glass, we got you covered. This is a tour for you. As always, send an email to info@ciderchat.com. Put in the title Cider Tours. Let us know how many people are in your tour group, and let us know, is it France that you're interested, the UK, maybe a tour somewhere else in the States? Kind of doing it all right now, and would love to have you along.
Walking through the orchard.
It's time now for our featured presentation with Paul Stevens of Newton Court, and he's going to be talking a bit about how he turned a 30-acre family farm into a cider destination with orchards, organic beef, a restaurant, tasting room, a production facility that has a lot of room for growth. Essentially, Newton Court is a prime example that if you build it, they will come. You'll be hearing Paul share how it all began, what inspired him to make cider at this level. His family has a bit of history in making cider already, but this is really upscaling it. And who inspired him to bring Newton Court to the direction that it is today as a destination. So that means if you've ever wondered what it takes to build a place that draws people in, not just for cider, but for the whole experience, then you're going to gain a lot from what I call Cider Tourism 101, making this a very fine time to grab a glass and join this chat with Paul Stevens of Newton Court, based in Herefordshire in the United Kingdom.
I've been making cider now for 25 years. So this started out when we first bought the farm here at Newton Court. The farm has got 15 acres of cider fruit, which was being sold to Bulmers Cider at the time. And it came a point where they no longer wanted our cider fruit. So we decided to start making our cider ourselves. Every farm in the UK can make 7,000 litres of cider without paying the duty on it. It seemed to be an obvious next step to adding value to something that was already being grown on the farm here.
What is the history of your family in terms of cider making? How long have they been as commercial cider makers?
Huge amount of history in making cider in Herefordshire. Every farm in Herefordshire made cider years ago. It was part of the fabric of rural life. And both my grandparents were involved in farming, and both of them made cider. But I can remember thinking that if I was going to make cider that somebody wanted to pay their hard-earned money for, then I needed to make some cider that was a little bit better than what they were making. And so I started on that journey. I was very lucky to meet a guy called Brian Shanks, Brian had sold his cider business in New Zealand, and he's been a huge inspiration to me. And he's the main reason that we're all sat here now, and we have got a business now that employs over 50 people.
Was there something about him that was really the touchstone for you to accelerate this farm and cidery to the point that it is?
It took a Kiwi to come over here, and he was working for Bulmers at the time, and he said, "Gosh, Paul, you're so lucky to live in this amazing part of the world where you've got so many different varieties of cider fruit, and more importantly, quantity." We all take it for granted, having brought up in this part of the world, that we have this history of growing cider fruit. And it wasn't until he explained to me that these orchards just don't grow anywhere in the world. And we are in one of the largest cider growing areas in the world. And I'm pretty right in saying that Herefordshire grows more cider fruit than anywhere else in the world.
When you were growing up as a child, and obviously you had to meet a Kiwi to get inspired to take it to the next level, you had other aspirations where you were in this farm and you moved on into engineering. Let's talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, I always wanted to be a farmer, and my uncle was farming, and he said, "You need to learn a trade, Paul, and because you can always come back to farming in any point in your life." And so I thought, well, the best thing to being a farm is an agricultural engineer. So I spent the first half of my working life travelling from farm to farm, working for a company called Case IH, and I would go farm to farm fixing people's agricultural equipment. But I was still, the whole time I was still involved in farming. And by the time I started making cider, I was mapping in the back of my head where all these orchards were, because I was still working as an agricultural engineer, and I'd started making cider. So I was very fortunate enough to know where every pear tree in Herefordshire is, and every Kingston Black cider fruit tree is in Herefordshire.
That is a good skill to have, or background, right?
Yeah.
Now, this farm segued into organic certification. Is that how we'd look at that?
Very much so, yeah. We became organic in about 1998. We were still selling cider fruit to Bulmers, and Bulmers Cider were considering going into making organic cider. And we were the first farm to sign up to an organic agreement with Bulmers. But that never came to fruition, but we carried on the organic status.
What was the reason why your family decided to go organic? Because it wasn't necessary. Was there some philosophical reason or some future thinking that this is a good idea to do that with the time?
Very much so. It's all about sustainable farming, producing beef, lamb, crops sustainably, and that fitted very much with our ethos. And so, yeah, it's very, very important to us.
Working with your family, which you obviously do, your family's here. I met your mother this morning.
Sure.
And then becoming the person who kind of takes it on to the next level. Are there any tips you have for working with the family, or for a child coming up into that next level that you experience? Any trials or tribulations? Because it could be both challenging, but also the experience of a lifetime.
Well, there are pros and cons with working with your family. A big pro is that you see more of each other, so you've got to get on with each other. Another big pro is that you're adding value to something that's already there, and we're all. I've got children, and our lives live through our children, and I think that's a very important part. And having that big question: what are we all doing it all for? So it's not easy working with family, having that structure, who's responsible for what, and communication is the key.
Absolutely. I'm kind of curious on that switchover, as you've obviously upped the game here. It's totally up leveled from, we were just walking from the restaurant, the visitor center essentially. It's outstanding. And walking over to this side where it was all original, you're mentioning as you're walking up this driveway. And, just for listeners out there, you're stepping back in history here. You could feel that with the stone walls and the old barns. Was there any convincing that had to be done for your parents to say, hey, look, cider's going to be the future here at a level that we don't expect? Was there some convincing that you had to do there? What gave you that spark that said, Mom, Dad, we need to look at the future here?
We've been watching, we haven't always been farmers. My dad worked in the oil industry. He worked overseas all of his working life. But the thing about my dad is that he's very open-minded. And I look at my neighbouring farms who are generation after generation, and they all expect you to do the same thing. It's very difficult to let go of that structure. But that's the great thing about my mum and dad, is that they are open-minded. For many years we've sold cider from the farm gate, and it's only recently that we took the massive decision to build a brand new farm shop and restaurant so that we could increase the footfall through here. We've become a destination, and by doing that we have increased our interest in our cider business, and it all builds on that experience.
And to be open-minded, is that a trait that you feel that you gained from your parents too? Would you consider yourself an open-minded person?
Absolutely. It's identifying those opportunities and finding a way to make them work. And it's not easy. It takes time, hard work and money that we've invested in it.
Yeah, and you have to go to the long term. We're going to go back to that in a moment. Let's just talk about the center now, Newton Court Visitor Center, the tasting room, a restaurant. It is a tourist destination. What were some of the challenges in that design and for this area? Let me just describe to visitors. You pull off the main road, you rise up the hill, and to the right is an apple orchard and then a parking area, and then you see the presentation right up on the building. It says Newton Court, also with lots of signage telling you what's available here. So you arrive and you feel immediately welcome. There's tables, outdoor tables. You walk into the main room. There's a square bar where there's people ready to address you, a little gift shop area, places to buy cider, and the full-time restaurant. How did that design come about? Was this something that you were envisioning, or were you traveling about looking at other places?
So I visited Brian. By now, Brian had started making and selling cider in Virginia. And he'd started Bold Rock Cider. So my reason for building this has been visiting Ellisford County, where they are now still making and selling cider. So that was a huge inspiration for me. And it was always instilled into me by Brian that it's very important part of telling the story about where cider comes from, giving people an opportunity to visit where you are, see where the apples grow, be able to have something nice to eat and have a glass of cider. And also what we've done is we've got windows into our cidery area where people can just sit and watch that bottling process. And we also do cider tours every Friday. You can jump on a cider tour. And so I've got one straight after this interview, actually. Yeah, we've become a destination, and it's all very important part of telling that story about who we are, and we're not just somebody in a unit on an industrial estate knocking out some cider.
You scaled up from 1,000 litres a year, is that what, 7,000 to 100,000 litres today.
Correct.
That's a big jump. So how do you scale up in that way? And obviously you have the apples in the region. How large is this farm or the orchard?
So we're currently at about 30 acres. So half of that is very old orchard, half of it is a very new orchard. So we're in that transition sort of area where we're only probably producing 40 tons of our own cider fruit. So we buy in quite a bit of cider fruit as well. So we've got other organic orchards. And that's the great thing about what we're doing, is that we're giving a home to that fruit that might not necessarily have been used. That a lot of these orchards have been dropped by the larger cider makers. And by creating that demand for that fruit, we're encouraging other farmers to maintain those orchards, to gap them up and to make sure that they're there for the next generation. Because we are seeing a downturn in demand for cider.
A downturn. Did I get that correct?
Yeah, yeah.
From like what year to what year are we talking about?
I would say in the last 10 years in the UK, demand for properly made cider is under pressure from fruit cider. So we've got a generation now that have been brought up with that fruit cider market. And if we're not careful, we will lose sight of what proper cider should be. So,
can I ask you what your definition of proper cider is?
You most definitely can. My mind was opened. I spent a few weeks learning the Cider Boucher technique of making cider in Normandy. I took a bit of time out and stayed with a chap out there. And it wasn't until I really spent some time out there and listened to how they made cider. So they've got the appellation de contrôle to make French Normandy cider and call it Cider Boucher. You can only use selected cider apple varieties. So I came back from that trip and I looked at the UK cider market back then, and this term cider is very rapidly becoming lost in its true identification. So what I would like to see is an act passed where only named apple cider varieties can be used on a bottle of cider, and you call that cider. Anything else is not cider. It's not difficult. One of the great things about doing our cider tours is I can start to talk to these people and explain to them what cider is. And we want the people to go away from here with that little bit of knowledge and start thinking about that. And when they go to a restaurant, when they go to a pub, and asking for some properly made cider.
Yeah. So Cider Boucher, for folks listening, means cider under a cork. Are you doing the cork and cage?
I do a little bit of that, but I quickly found that the cider market in the UK is completely different to the market in Normandy. The people in the UK are not prepared to spend that extra money that it takes to make that style of cider. Making cider today is a trade-off of being able to pay the bills and having a business. That's a very, very tight line that everybody in the UK treads. If you've got to borrow money today to make cider, you're not going to make it. You're not going to pay the mortgage making Cider Boucher in the UK.
I always like to put in yet. We like to believe towards the future. And part of what you're doing here, then education, and as the palate changes and folks understand the quality, it's all about quality and quality of life too. So let's talk a little bit about your cider making style then, what you're doing and how that's obviously transitioned to be able to diversify for the audience that you're serving now? I imagine it's multi-generational. Folks are kind of coming in here with the new drinkers and an older population.
Very much so, yeah. So I looked at the cider market, the smallest craft cider scene. It's all about dry ciders, natural ferments, and a keen eye on selecting apple cider varieties, which is amazing. That's great. But I was losing too much cider that was going off with trying to make cider that way. No consistency. Right. And if you're making 100,000 litres of cider, that's a lot of work, effort and time that's gone into making it. And I can't afford to lose it. So I was taught to make cider is a little bit of sulphite at pressing time. Most of our orchards that we are making cider from are old, bittersweet, bitter sharps, little bit of sweets in them. When they planted these orchards, they were planting a recipe, 8, 9 different varieties in each orchard. And when they're all picked and together, they made a certain style of cider. So that's what I've got to work with. So there's no point in me trying to reinvent the wheel. So our Gasping Goose cider is a cider that is made from the apples grown in these orchards, and we can get quite good consistency with that as long as we're using the same orchards every year. So just to try and, as a point of interest and a point of difference, we have got access to some single varieties. If we can get enough of one variety of apple, we'll make Yarlington Mill, we'll do a Harry Masters, we'll do a Browns. Foxwell was very, very popular, but I can't get enough of it. And those single varieties are all great, but it's the Gasping Gooses, it's our first presses, Scrumpy Star Ciders.
Is it Gasping Goose a Scrumpy style cider? That's not. No. So let's just stick on that one for 5 different varieties of apples. Is that true? Is that what we're hearing?
Would be a minimum of 5 different varieties.
And that's really your flagship cider, the Gasping.
Absolutely.
And what's the ABV for that?
5.8.
5.8.
5.8 in the bottle and 4.8 on draft.
Oh, okay, nice. And this is sparkling?
It is.
It is sparkling.
So we do a bag in box.
Okay.
Which is obviously still.
Still, yeah. And that goes out to different accounts in the region.
Yeah, so once a week we've got a van that does North Herefordshire. So that van will drop off bottles of cider to farm shops, delis. We've got the ability to keg cider here. So we will drop off to the pubs.
Okay.
And then the next week we'll try and do South Herefordshire.
Okay.
And but our biggest customer is our shop, the people that come to visit us. And then we've got the online sales that everybody else sells their cider through. So
the Gasping Goose is the flagship. And I heard you say that you do some, when you can, some single varietal ciders. Would those be in large format bottles or smaller bottles? We do 330 ml, what we call 330 ml, and 500 ml. The size of bottle debate is very interesting. Oh. So 330 ml in the UK, pubs like them, restaurants like them. You can get more bottles in the fridge. So you can have a 330 ml cider with a meal, whereas the farm shops that are selling to people that are going to buy this and take it home, they want the bigger 500 ml. It's almost like a different market. Yeah. We do our Cidre Boucher is presented in a 750 ml champagne bottle. Okay. Yeah. Yeah, I did see some 750 ml bottles on your shelf in the shop there. Yeah, sure. Yeah. You mentioned France and like the AOC and that designation for certain blends. Is that something that you're hoping that will come about here? Or is there any kind of movement in that way? Enough voices? Yeah, very much so. So I'm a member of the Three Counties Cider Association. I'm not a active member.
but I've been a member for all my time of making and selling cider. Cider in the UK is such a regional drink. You'll only find cider fruit orchards in Herefordshire, parts of Worcester, Gloucester, then you get down into Somerset, Dorset, Devon, Cornwall. You won't find cider fruit orchards anywhere else in the UK. The rest of the UK is drinking beer. They're making and selling beer. So there's a very regional drink over here.
Regional drink? The UK is like the highest consuming country for cider. So when you
I
say
think most of it's drank in the southwest.
oh, interesting. Okay, not other parts as
Well,
well.
later it is, but not so much. If you start getting
Right.
at sort of north of Birmingham,
Yeah.
it is still drank, but
right.
not so much.
Yeah, traveling about, it is hard to find tap non-industrial ciders.
Yeah, sure. This is still a big problem for us, is getting that message through that non-industrial or non-larger making ciders. That market is very, very keenly, what's the word? Very good at doing what they do.
Yeah, they have large distribution,
Yeah, exactly.
and that really
That's a
rolls
very
into
hard market to penetrate.
Sure is, yeah, no doubt. But part of you having Newton Court open to the public as it is with the restaurant, and cider pairs better with food than any other
It does.
drink.
But just because it's craft cider, it doesn't mean to say it's nice cider.
Can you call it craft cider then? Or I would call it industrial cider.
No. I was saying even smaller, small scale cider makers are still making not nice cider.
Oh, okay.
Well, there's a little bit for me. There's a little bit of cider out there on a smaller scale that should not be sold
Because it's not palpable to.
Yeah.
And okay, yeah. I think that's probably true in every part of the world where
Sure.
you have that, and it could give cider a bad name.
Yeah.
People have a bad experience. That's always, a concern for any niche business. That's why it's important for folks to seek out the quality cider. Now, you were talking about the cider making style, some sulfites, you're using cultured yeast.
Sure.
Pretty much standard there. You're not doing any barrel aging, are you?
We do a little bit.
You do a little bit? Can you talk about your barrel program?
Yeah. We use oak casks. We've got a quantity of whiskey casks. We make and sell a scrumpy style cider. I call it scrumpy cider. So I think everybody's it's a little bit of, it's quite an interesting term, scrumpy cider, because it means different things to different people. Mm-hmm. So traditionally, scrumpy cider, in my opinion, is what my granddad made. It was a wild ferment, typically in an oak cask, and it was allowed to ferment out to dry, where it was sealed and tapped, and that's what many farms around here drank. Mm-hmm. So it hasn't been filtered, hasn't had any sulfites, and it hasn't had any yeast in it. It might have had a little bit of sugar, or they might have used sort of a molasses just to increase the ABV and top up the barrel during fermentation. My take on a scrumpy cider today is we have fermented it in an oak cask, but we have added back a little bit of sugar. Most of our ciders are what we call back sweetened.
With juice?
Just sugar.
Sugar. Oh.
Just a little bit of sugar. All of our ciders, I would like to think that anybody could come to our shop and buy a bottle of our cider and give it as a present to somebody, and everybody's going to enjoy it, because we know from experience that most people's tastes today, they don't like bone dry cider.
Well, that was going to lead me to my next question. What is your most dry cider? Because the listeners of this podcast have a strong affection for dry cider that really show the essence of the fruit at its best.
I agree. For me, the Cider Brochet style of cider is the finest way to drink cider. So a little bit of residual fruit sugar, a little bit of fizz, and that is the best way to drink cider.
Is that a keep cider then?
It would be, yeah.
It would be a keep cider. So
Sure.
you're keeping your cider here then?
Yeah.
Okay, so folks would be wanting to look for that if they really want to have the essence of Newton Court
Sure.
at its best.
So our only one is our Black Mountain cider, which is keeved.
Okay, and all the ciders here, 100% apples?
Yes.
Consumers nowadays and the demand for kind of like the craft beer where what's new? What do you have new on the shelf? Do you have anything different? Do you get that kind of chant coming in from consumers?
Yeah, so whilst I've been in New Zealand and in Virginia visiting Brian, the only fruit that they have got is eating apples, eating apple varieties. That's all they have got to use. They haven't really got quantity of the styles of cider apples that I'm used to using, but they've still managed to make a multi-million pound business out of selling that style of cider. So I've enjoyed many a glass of Bold Rock Cider, and it's what I would term a new age cider. So,
or I would call it an industrial cider. That's how we would kind of term it, as a more higher production, a quicker turnover.
Just because it's made from eating apple varieties, but it has
it turns over quicker than your average bottle conditioned cider, right? So,
I think it's quicker. It's quicker you don't have to leave it to maturate. You can bottle it pretty much. The way I look at it is a red wine versus a white wine, because I'm led to believe white wine is bottled quite quickly after fermentation. It doesn't need that maturation that a red wine has. So this is a style of cider that we now make from eating apple varieties. So we're using a little bit of Bramley, Cox's Orange Pippin, and there's another one in there now, I can't remember.
Yeah. It's okay. Many apples, only 14,000.
But it's crisp. Get that green apple taste to it, but more importantly, it's sharp. That sharpness that modern taste likes today. They don't. We're seeing that move away from that traditional style of cider. It's got tannin. It's got dry mouthfeel. Not everybody likes it.
There's just a cider for every palate, isn't there?
Absolutely.
And that's what you need to address when you're in business, for sure.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Future looking, do you foresee adding any other fruits, or is there kind of a strict code of conduct here in your business mission plan to stay strictly apples, or do you get that demand for the fruit cider or the hop cider?
We picked up a first prize at our local competition for our Elderflower Cider recently.
Yeah. I kind of knew that, but I was kind of wondering where we were going to go with that. So you do play with it.
I'm not sure if you're aware or not, but we're partners with Hugh Fernley Whittingstall at River Cottage. He's a bit of a national treasure. He was on the TV with his story called River Cottage. And because we're one of the only sort of larger organic cider makers in the UK, they got in touch with us and said, we've got some cider fruit here down at River Cottage. Would you help us make some cider? And then he led me down the road a little bit and sprung onto me that they'd like to do an elderflower style cider. And I was very hesitant about this. But Hugh very kindly sort of came up to Hereford one day, and we played around with steeping some elderflower heads in water for a couple of days, and we then added that to some of our gasping goose, and it worked really, really well. We're now making bottle elderflower cider for River Cottage. It works so good.
Well, that's what people see with the I'm going to call them collaborations, whether it's with grapes or hops or fruit. Yeah. That's why that market has really infused into cider making, because not just because folks don't have the apples, but we see that the apple's very welcoming. So I want to say the apple doesn't fall too far from the tree with that open-mindedness that runs in your family.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. I mean, why not, right? If it's there in the demand.
Yeah, and we've got the elderflower is growing wild on our farm, and we've got an abundance of it.
Fantastic.
And it is sort of the true ethos of River Cottage, where that foraging attitude. Yeah, so it's really come together really well.
Yeah. Well, my sense of meeting you for the first time and just as you were talking is, and I think this is true for any farmer, is that you can't be too pigeonholed or otherwise your business will stay stagnant in one level. So would it be a good descriptor for yourself to say that the future does have an evolution here and that you're going to kind of work with the times as it is for your customers, and that Newton Court will evolve? It doesn't necessarily mean that it's always going to be that 100% apples moving forward, and that you will move with the times accordingly? Or do you have some strict lines that you will not cross?
No, very much so. Our latest thing is we're seeing a bigger demand for the higher ABV cider, so we're looking at our local cider maker. Wow. I think that they're tracking their bottled cider at 8.2% is third largest selling bottle of cider in the UK.
My goodness! Wow.
I mean, you can't ignore that.
No, you can't.
So.
But is that because the apples have a high Brix? Like we're here in 2025, you've had an incredibly dry year. The apples must be super condensed with sugars, I suspect. Perhaps you've been testing that. So there is a good chance that the cider that you make this season will be at that higher ABV to let it kind of go naturally, and that you might get what we would call an imperial cider.
Oh yeah, well,
are you forecasting that?
Very much so.
Okay.
My discussions or chats over the years with the older cider makers, it was once in 7 years you'd have a vintage year, what they would call a vintage year,
right?
Where rainfall, the sunshine, all came together. So I think we're in for a vintage year this year. We had a very good fruit set during the spring. There's a lot of cider fruit around, and we've just had one of our hottest summers ever. So it's going to be a cracking year for cider.
Yeah, and without even working, you'd be able to get probably that 8.2, 8.5, no problem.
No problem whatsoever.
Yeah.
But I do know that people, they sweeten cider during fermentation, and they're taking it up to 11, 12%.
Yeah,
which is quite easy to do. So
I know.
So it's chapel. I think they call it chapelizing.
Yes, they do. Yeah, I would say the listeners out there in Ciderville, as we call it, are looking for that more pure essence of the apple itself. And so that leads me to another question: tannin. How much is your audience here interested in tannin? For myself, and I'll be very transparent, I'm very interested in that kind of structure, that astringency, that tannin, a bit of apple, but a very complex cider that's going to finish through. And ABV, in my mind, obviously you enjoy French ciders. We have like 4.5% ciders over there, and they're the most complex ciders you could imagine. But how about your ciders? What would be a tannin? I was want to say a tannin bomb, or would it be that Cider Boucher that we were going for with the key?
We've got some Yarrington Milsing variety. That is probably the highest tannin cider that we've got at the moment. From
2024, it kind of sells out like that?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. We're marketing it as a sort of a medium sweet. I'm not sure you're going to enjoy it much, to be honest.
It's 100% Yarrington Mill. That would be a little chapelization with it too?
No chapelization.
No? Okay.
We've just added back sugar to taste.
Okay.
We've back sweetened it.
All right. We'll follow up on that one. So looking forward to I had hoped that we would be able to taste some cider, but I guess that I'll have to go back in there.
I've only got some goose.
Oh, okay. Well, that's fine.
Okay?
Let's have that. Cheers.
Cheers. Good health.
Yes. This is a Gasping Goose, and number one seller.
Yes, this is made last year, and it was bottled back in July by the looks of it.
Okay, very fruity. Anyone coming to the UK for the first time would be so happy to have something like that, because it'd be like, I'm tasting the apples. It gives me that sense of Herefordshire. That's what you want in a cider, especially a showcase cider.
It's got very, very ripe apple coming through, isn't it?
Very, very right off the nose, and the nose follows through with the palate. Just for folks who aren't sitting here, on the label, there's a beautiful goose here. It says premium organic cider. Love that it says made in Herefordshire. It's 5.8%. This is in a 500 ml bottle. And on the back, there's a bit more info. There's a sliding scale. It shows the sharpness, a little bit of tannin, and the sweetness. Tells you how to store it. Of course, gluten-free. That's one of the reasons why I think cider is kind of popular, because there's a tendency. Do you get a lot of folks coming in specific to that?
Yeah, we get asked a lot about gluten-free and also vegan-friendly, which it all is.
And yeah, that's a kind of a critical thing right now. So the future plan. It looks like an empire from the outside with, one stage here and now that amazing visitor center and full service tourism destination. Where do you go on from here? What is the 10, 15, 25-year plan for Newton Court?
It's to carry on telling that story about cider, making sure that we've still got somewhere for people that can get off a plane at Heathrow, hire a car, drive to Hereford, and they've still got somewhere to visit that makes and sells cider. It's all about maintaining that history, heritage, making sure that we've still got farms that are maintaining them, and telling that story about real cider.
It's something that we need to keep on doing no matter what, as long as cider's been around. Do you have a short elevator pitch for cider? When folks say, what is cider?
Well, it is interesting, because I know that if you ask for a glass of cider in the States, you get given a glass of apple juice. And so we kind of take it for granted that people know what cider is. But you are right, we mustn't do that. And that definition of what cider is, so it's coming back to, holding on to that entity of using fruit from known apple cider varieties. That's why I like making cider from eating apples, is that's part of what our tasting is, that contrast between that full tannin cider that you've just tried now, as opposed to one from that eating apple. It's pretty much crystal clear and white. So that's what I do, is I compare it to a red wine and a white wine. That's how I look at it.
Okay.
But should the one from an eating apple still be called cider? I don't know.
Well, I guess that is up to the producer.
Yeah.
Right.
I guess at the end of the day, all we are doing is fermenting the fruit sugars out of something that we have pressed. That's all you're doing with wine grapes. That's all. You could do it with plums. You could do that with any fruit that has got a fruit sugar in it.
Yeah.
But to call it cider, it has got to be from named apple cider varieties.
Thank you for being part of Cider Chat.
Pleasure.
What Paul and his family have built in Newton Court is lovely. And as I think back on that visit, I can't help but wonder where cider tourism continues to go from here. What will be those new destinations that will hear what Paul is saying and say, hey, let's do that? Or those makers who already have a product and say, well, let's build this next level. It's constantly happening. It's constantly evolving. And as a world leader in cider tours, I've seen what happens when the cider, the setting, and the story all come together. But we know not every world-class cider maker wants to run a restaurant, and not every restaurateur makes world-class cider. But both matter. Each is a building block that lifts the other up. When they connect, cider wins. And so do we, the drinkers, because the key ingredient, the secret sauce, is making sure the cider in the glass lives up to the magic of the place. Yeah, Totally, 100%. Cider tourism needs destinations like Newton Court, places that are visible and welcoming, where visitors can walk in the orchard, meet the maker, and feel part of the story. And that's what we aim for on Totally Cider Tours, bringing people to those corners of the cider world where hospitality meets world-class cider. That's when the story, the sip, the glass, and the setting all come together. And that, Ciderville, right there, is the magic. And with that, I leave you here. This is Rhea Windcaller signing off for now. Looking forward to seeing you in Ciderville.
Strange apples, bitter sharp. Strange apples, juicy and ripe. Bop, 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 ba-da-dum-doo-doo-dop, bop, 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 ba-da-dum-doo-doo-dop. Who wants a tannenbaum?
I want a tannenbaum.
Who wants to pull them down?
I'm gonna pull them down. Hey, 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 apples,
Bittersweet, strange apples, hanging high. Got them strange apples. Forget the pie. Strange apples, squeeze them tight. Got them strange apples. Strange apples. Strange apples. Make them pop. Pop, 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 ba-da-dum-doo-doo-dop, pop, 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 ba-da-dum-doo-doo-dop.
Who wants a tannenbaum?
I want a tannenbaum.
Who wants to pull them down?
I'm gonna pull them down. Hey, 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 apples. Come and see. Plenty strange apples for you and me. Strange apples. Strange apples. Strange apples. Make them pop. Pop, pop, pop. Ba-da-doo-doo-da. Pop, pop, pop. Ba-da-doo-doo-da. Pop, pop, pop. Ba-da-doo-doo-da. Pop, pop, pop. Pop, 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 pop.